Okay. First things first, a Psyop. A Psyop is a psychological operation, and it's designed to control people in some way. And in this video, I'm going to try to show how religions are Psyops, and they're employed by the elites for the purpose of establishing control over their populace. And, we deal with Psyops all the time. A commercial is a Psyop, a TV commercial, or, we deal with them all the time. But it's really kind of simple. The powerful create a religion so they can use people to get rich and powerful and use God as an excuse to do it. And, you might think, well, how do we know that? Why would they do that? Okay, they're not stupid. And it's not necessarily to analyze the people who are running things to figure out the whole thing. All you need to do is look at the result to determine the motives. Because like I say, they're not stupid. Just look at what it does and cui bono, who it benefits. Okay? So, onward and upward. Okay, I'll start with Islam. I've been learning a little bit about this religion the past few days. After all, there's all the commotion in Israel and then throughout the world, of Palestine and all that, to the river, from the river to the sea, blah, blah, blah. So I thought I'd start with it. Now, these guys, they have 3 holy books, the Quran, the Hadith, and the Surah. And they're a jumble of cherry-picked sayings and stories gleaned from about 600,000 scraps of paper, pottery, bone, and etc. And it was all taken down about 150 years after Muhammad lived. Muslims would disagree with that. There's a guy named Jay Smith, though, on the internet. You might want to look him up, YouTube. He does a really good job of showing the timeline and what happened. But anyway, out of the 600,000 scraps, only 1% were used. About 150 to 200 years after Muhammad had died, okay? So, in essence, these guys who made it all up, they were creating a religion for themselves so they could control folks and have an empire and, run all over the world cutting people's heads off and what have you. It's a system of total control from what I've seen. And both political and psychological. It conforms to the very definition of totalitarian. These guys, these mullahs and imams, they'll even tell you how to wipe your ass. My God. Anyway, it asserts political control of humanity by a ruling class using God as its authority to do so. And then I listed some of the stuff that they do. Oh, and by the way, followers must convert to Islam, and if you don't, they'll kill you. They will allow you to practice your own religion as long as you pay a tax. But if you can't pay the tax, then you have to convert or die. Slavery's cool, especially sex slavery. Sex has a lot to do with these guys. Their concept of heaven is a big orgy. Very carnal. And it happens today. It's still done. Lying to non-Muslims is considered to be a good thing. So you can't ever trust anything that some bitches say. And, if you try to leave Islam, they kill you. They put you to death and stone you and what have you. And perpetual war. But in essence, they've created a doctrine essentially to attempt world conquest. And naturally, who benefits? It's the guys running everything. The guy who runs Hamas, he lives in Yemen in a $20 million mansion. I heard 20 million, maybe not, but a huge mansion. And all the people he supposedly, leading and caring for, they're all living in squalor back in Gaza. Some bitch doesn't even have the common decency to live among his own people. In essence, it foments a perpetual state of war against all non-Muslims. And make no mistake, their goal is to convert you or kill you. That's just all there is to it. But anyway, that's Islam, and it's so obviously created as a way to just control people and get them to go out and try to conquer the world for you and not mind dying and all that. So anyway, after this, let's go on to another. Okay, next on the agenda is Judaism. And it's a little more subtle, but really by no means less deadly under the proper set of circumstances. See, everything about these guys is predicated on the Torah, which would be the first 5 books of what the Christians call the Old Testament. In particular, the book of Genesis is the nexus of the whole thing. And it all revolves around the possession of Palestine. Now, Genesis wasn't written until about 500 BC, after they came back from being exiled in Babylon. So the possession of Palestine would have been paramount in their psyche. But the thing is, the events depicted in Genesis occurred at least 1,000 years before they were written down. So we don't know really what was said. I mean, these guys got the Muslims beat hands down. The Muslims about 200. These guys are 1 to 2,000. So we really don't even know. We really don't even know what went on back then. But basically, Abraham was promised, according to the story, or maybe you could call it the myth, Abraham was promised possession of Palestine, not only to him, but to all his descendants, which of course would be the Jews. And then you have the story of Moses and how they escaped and all that. But then, see, they also have the story of Joshua when they actually invaded Palestine and took it for themselves. And in that book, God personally told Joshua to exterminate the whole country, men, women, and children, even the animals, kill them all, genocide. So, in essence, what you have here with this story, these stories, is a claim to possess Palestine, and because God told Joshua it was okay, also the moral authority to do anything to possess it. It also establishes genetic superiority over the rest of the human race, the master race. They're better than everybody else. And it's really kind of, I don't know, man. But anyway, that's Judaism. And as you can clearly see, it was concocted by their leaders to justify doing whatever it took to get Palestine. I mean, there's no other way to see it that I can think of. But anyway, that's Judaism, and it seems pretty obvious to me. Okay, next up's Christianity. And this gets a little more complicated, because if you look at the teachings of Jesus and his apostles, those teachings can't be reconciled with corporeal power. They just can't. It teaches forgiveness, teaches love for your enemy. You can't run a country like that. And so they had to figure out a way, if they were going to get people on the bandwagon, they had to figure out a way to somehow override Jesus's teachings and to get people to really kind of forget what he taught. Okay, so this is where the papacy comes in. If Jesus won't say what you want him to, we'll just come up with a guy who can speak for Jesus and say whatever we want. They took a statement that Jesus made to Peter about having the keys to the kingdom. So they invented this this mythos that the first pope was Peter, and he had the authority to pretty much do whatever he wanted in Jesus's name. So you created this unbroken line of popes, and the pope could essentially tell you to do anything, and if he said that it was okay with God, then hell, it was okay with God. It made possible such practices as inquisitions, which secret police is all that is. They had the confessions to the priests, because after all, they came up with this priesthood that you couldn't be forgiven of sins unless you talked to a priest. Well, you couldn't get forgiven of the sins until you told them what you need to be forgiven of. So in essence, they created a de facto spy network all over Europe, right down to the local level. And they could keep their eye on the pulse of whatever was going on. It's totalitarian. It's fascist. And, the papacy implemented torture, burning people alive, repression of science, you name it. Anything really pretty much bad that's happened in Europe, they've been the cause of it. Any advancement in humanity in the last couple of thousand years, they were against it. The printing press, any science, you name it. These guys were all about trying to maintain control of the civil populace, and they did a good job of it for a long time, till people finally got a belly full of it, and Martin Luther came along and told them to fuck off. Oh yeah, they also superimposed pagan gods over Christian personas too, and that's an interesting little story. You've got the cult of Nimrod, Ishtar, and Tammuz. Father, mother, and child. Or you could say Ra, Isis, and Horus. And so they took those concepts and they superimposed them upon God the Father, Mary, and Jesus. And it's really essentially the same thing. And if you go to Rome, or if you look at a lot of the shit that goes on, the symbolism of that is just so stark. And if you know what to look for, it's just all around you there. But at any rate, that's Christianity, and, it's what's been done with Christianity is, I think, probably the most evil of all the religions. However, that's not to condemn the Lord. No, you can't justify any villainy perpetrated by people calling themselves Christians by the words of Jesus at all. But anyway, that's Christianity. Now you may ask yourself, hey, Flo, why would people put up with this shit for thousands of years? Over and over again, people put up with religion telling them what to do, depriving them of their wealth, sending them off to die, sending their sons off. It's a piquant question, and it's one I've asked myself many times over the years, and about a year or so ago it hit me. And this is my idea. I haven't ever read this anywhere. No expert has told me this or anything like that, but I kind of concluded that it's Stockholm Syndrome. People swear blind allegiance and abasement because of Stockholm Syndrome. And in case you didn't know what that was, I'll just read it here. Sometimes people who are held prisoner or are subject to abuse can have feelings of sympathy or other positive feelings toward their captor. This seems to happen over days, weeks, months, or years of captivity and close contact with the captor. Now, not everybody who gets captured develops the Stockholm Syndrome, but that's when you're being held captive by some guy with a gun. But think about it. What if God is holding you captive, which is what these religions are? They're holding you captive, your mind, and your body too. I think people just develop the Stockholm Syndrome, and they learn to love their slavery. And that's the reason why people are so fanatically devoted to these religions. And it serves their masters well. Now, okay, I'm concluding here, but one thing I want to make clear, I am not an atheist. Okay? But I am very much the foe of organized religion. Because like I'm saying, it's just but a psyop to try to control you and keep you fucked over at the expense, to the aggrandizement of the rich. That's really just all it is. But anyway, if you like my video, like it and subscribe, because that's how I get more of an audience. Thank you for staying with it if you stayed with it to the end. I think I have things that are worth saying and worth hearing. And anyway, thank you very much.